if we can distinguish what comes from a fellow human, like a dogma, don't think of it necessarily as divine. The most unmolested dogma is Buddhism, right? But Christianity, if Christ was at the level of 1,000, Christianity in the first century was at the level 900. And today it's below the second. It's down to the 100 something, because it has been so changed through translations and manipulations by priesthood mostly, I would think. But so a dogma is not necessarily divine truth if it has been messed with. So
do you attribute that to the Dark Ages and
no,
the quest of
attribute that
control?
to
Just a evolution of translations, kind of whittling it away, or
I think it's just our nature, because we have the five senses, right? And because it takes free will for us to decide to align to the divine, we're always falling back to our five senses and what they experience outside. And so most humans, most of humanity is in the Kabbalah level today. So below even fear, in the shame and guilt levels. And these people can become priests, they can become monks. I mean, it's where we lived for so many centuries. Hawkins had calibrated the United States to be around 420 in the 90s, to be in the scientific reason 400 level. I don't think we're there anymore. I think we have
dropped, I think.
gone down. Why? Because science is not telling the truth, and that means it fell below 200.
Yeah.
So it's in the 100 level. When you hear all of these scientists believe that you don't need to test a vaccine and you can just enforce it, that's below the 200.
Yeah.
And so Middle Ages today, what's the difference? We're all still there, right? The question is, what does it take to move up? And you can only move up as an individual. It's not the culture. The culture is made up of many individuals, and it will calibrate a certain level based on where the majority is at, right?
And you mentioned earlier that the earth frequencies was now at the level of forcing the free will.
Allowing you to, or inviting the, let me say, inviting the free will, right?
Okay. So,
and there's, go ahead.
So this dropping down and in conjunction with the earth frequency at the allowing the free will is almost setting up the people to stand up against things when it gets too bad.
Right, but it's also setting up people to go against things that were helpful to us up to now, right? Religion was helpful, history was helpful, police was helpful. So they stand up against these as well, because to carve your own belief system, you have to reject everything. Yeah. Think about it. Think about your own journey. Didn't you have to reject everything first?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where we are culturally right now. And then as you began to tread your path again, some of what you rejected, you pulled back in. But some of it stayed away. I think at least that was my experience. And
Yeah, you bring back, if you threw the baby out with the bathwater, you bring the baby back. I guess I don't know how else to say it.
yeah, or what you consider to be the baby, which may be different from someone else's thought, right? I mean, it's very subjective. Truth even is subjective. You can only relate to your own truth, but that may be different to someone else's truth.
Because we have all different experiences. So,
Well, I look at it again, look at it as a symbol. If you think of the divine busting into these milliards of sparks that became us eventually, but they also became other things. They became stars and planets, and we're just the last the last bunch to come about, right? But older sparks became major forces in the universe. So if you think about it, though, think about it spatially, the divine busts out in all directions. Each spark, to return to the divine, carves a line from its position to the divine. And that line differs from your line because you're in a different position. But the truth is what links you to the divine. Because ultimately, this vertical line that I call the axis mundi is what aligns you to the divine. But given that we're all over the place, each of our lines is a different radius back to that divine center. And by the way, I wanted to say another thing that is a mistranslation. When in Greek you say monogenes, unigenito, that means once born. It doesn't mean only son. Monotokos would mean only son. So Christ is not the only son of God. He's just that son who did not reincarnate, right? Because he transfuses in Jesus after the or upon the water baptism. So he is the divine becoming man, but not having gone through cycles of reincarnation. And see, taking reincarnation out of our belief system, that was done by those later priests. And why? Because they want a flock that they can move around and they can be shepherd. And if you because if you believe in one life only, there is no way you will believe in this system I'm talking about, because in every life you'd be lucky if you move 5 points along this ladder, right? You must apply your will to even do that much. So it will take thousands of lives to move up. If they tell you you only have one life and then you need to go to church and pay money to have your sins forgiven, well, there you go. You got a business going. I'm sorry, I'm so blatant, but I used to be so angry at them, and now I'm kind of laughing. I'm kind of thinking this needed to happen because each of us needed to remember on our own, remember our divinity on our own, rather than rely on ancient documents.
So, do you know historically when they removed the concept of reincarnation in the translations?
I don't think they removed it in the translations. But I
It's
think
the
by translating monogenes, our own son, rather than the son who was born once, in a way, they are allowing for that notion. I don't think Christ ever said there is reincarnation, but in a lot of miracles where he says your sins are forgiven, some of those sins were from other lives. So I think in that time, it was natural to believe in reincarnation. If you read Plato, Socrates talks about reincarnation. So the whole world believed in it and saw it and experienced it, just as what comes to us from India these days. But somehow the Western church wiped that out and made it a sin to even think that way.
And that's where I was wondering when that happened. You know, even if we can't even pinpoint that. It was just a curiosity. It's not important.
That would be so hard to tell because it was an unspoken reality. You know what I mean? But at 300, when Constantine burned and declared anything pagan should be destroyed, I would say that was the big impact. And why? Because Constantine used Christianity as a source of power, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't believe in any of it at all. So I would say it was around that time that the grab happens. But it
Okay.
happens in subtle ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I talk about soul, and we have an individual soul. Animals have an oversoul. So a species of animals is belongs to or is guided by that oversoul. Uh, until you have a pet and you name it and you begin to train it to obey you and to control its own minds, and then it's beginning to bring soul within. Um, and then there is the cosmic soul, and the cosmic soul is what you enter through astral experience. So most of the healings and hypnosis and all of these, let me take you to a place of relaxation. That's an astral journey that allows you to open your boundaries to the cosmic soul boundaries, and that's a peaceful feeling, but it's not your own soul, right? You need to build your own soul to go there, rather than just be guided through a meditation to experience it. So if you think when we were in paradise, right, we lived in that cosmic soul. We lived in total obedience to it. And it was very peaceful. And when we bust out of it, why? Because we fall, right? If you think about there is a Cryon, he's a major master who speaks through what he calls his partner. It's a channel, the channel sessions. He says when man was created, he was created at the 350 level. That would be right there between the second and the third. He doesn't say it that way. He says human DNA, the way it was created by God, is 35% light, 65% dark. And he says this shows you that light is stronger than darkness because it only takes 35% to balance the 65%. Okay, I read that. I read if you think of this as DNA for a minute, and instead of going from 0 to 1,000, it's 0 to 100. When he says 35%, he's talking about this, 350 level. So we were born right between that second and third level, ready to move to reason. But through fear, we begin to lie, which makes you fall below the 200. The minute you lie, you fall below 200. So there's many ways to talk about the same thing, symbolically or not. I mean, DNA, you could think of it as symbolic also, right?
Marina, you were talking about Cryon?
Yes. Yeah, he's the one who says our original DNA was 35% light, 65% darkness. And as you build your soul, you're building that DNA and you're increasing your light, right, in your DNA. Meaning you're activating more DNA to function for you. You move up from the 35%, right? Because you function through light, and if only 35% of your DNA is light, and you need to move up, it's building soul that makes you move up. And these are just words, right? I mean, words are not even part of the divine realm. So you can really draw parallels between multiple things to realize. I did that in my journey. I considered everything a teacher, and I would consider everything a parallel, and you can bring it back, let's say, to this Hawkins ladder, for example, and it will teach you something, right? Because these are symbols, and symbols, how do they differ from words? They are multidimensional, and words are not. Well, some words are. If you say Christmas, that's talking about a symbol, right? So it's multidimensional. But if you say, here's my train. If you say truth versus lie, that's, again, I guess you can think of words as symbols, but usually we think of them as a very flat meaning. And that's part of our 4 dimensions, not multidimensional yet. So when we started this whole series, we talked how there's a potential of 7 bodies for a human being. And I talked about how obviously we have the physical, the etheric, the astral, which we developed in previous planet incarnations. And in this planet incarnation, we're developing the 4th body, which some people call the ego body, some people call it the soul. As long as you use ego without meaning egotism, that's fine, right? Because you can only build soul by becoming an individual. So that is the process we're in right now. And people have a very hard time focusing on being an individual, because every dogma, every trend, everybody selling something tries to get you to think otherwise, right? So the whole world today does not believe in what you cannot see, and soul you cannot see, definitely spirit you cannot see. But there's so many other things we cannot see. We cannot see what comes to our TV, what comes to our phone, and yet we believe in it, right? Why draw the line? What's so different? It's not. So one way to get people to become individual is to remind them to search for meaning. Don't just believe something and follow it, and search what carries meaning for you. And that's a way to draw that wedge, and get people to not focus as much on the physical reality around us, but begin to focus on what lies within. Individuation needs the symbolic. It needs an inner authentic life that gets rid of fear and pretenses. So, people who dress up and need a lot of makeup and all of that, it's out of fear, right? What are you fearing? What is it? It's one thing to dress up in order to honor somebody, and another thing to dress up in order to hide something, right? So our tendency to obedience is always there. Replacing it with free will literally means awakening that 700 point of enlightenment where your Adam's apple is, and you return your free will to its divine center. Whereas when I show it at the 300 level, in the second level, that's human will, right? That's the will you have learned to hold as your lantern. But when you in enlightenment, you recognize the divine will and you let it flow through you. And there is a difference, right? And
Yeah.
and then think what in your life has become a crutch. Is it your psychiatrist? Is it a therapist? Is it your religion? Why do you need it? And how do you yourself become plugged into the divine rather than to need to lean on something? And when you take a Kabbalah lesson, they use this term of plugged in a lot. It's like if you plug in a light to the electricity available to the house, then you can turn on the lamp, right? But until you plug it in, you could switch the lamp on or off and it won't make any difference. And they use that analogy to say you as an individual can become plugged in. You don't need a priest, you don't need a mediator to the divine, because the divine is inside you.
So what you're really saying there is there's a distinction between using religion as a crutch versus feeling your own connection, but having your religion as a community. A lot of people
That is
have
very
a community,
important.
have a
Community
community
is
where they
very
pray
important.
together, and yeah. Okay.
And even Christ says, you can reach me in dialogue with another, right? It's like you need to be in community as a human being. You cannot just isolate yourself as a monk or whatever. I mean, you can, but if you want to serve, you need to be in community. And again, do not look for salvation outside you. So I have this good friend, and she's always concerned about what is coming. And I'm asking her, why does it concern you what is coming? Why don't you just let it come and we meet it when it is upon you? She says, yeah, you're right. But then her next question is, well, listen to this um, webinar or podcast and tell me what you think. And it's another person offering hope about what is coming. And I'm like, okay, is hope a good place to be? I don't know. I have to see where it is on this calibration. I don't know offhand, but it's taking you outside of yourself. Hope takes you in a way to expect things to happen outside you rather than what you control within you. So when I say look at everything as your teacher, health problems are a teacher. You know, metabolizing trauma to awakening is a very solid path. But you need to be of the mindset that the disease did not happen to you to hurt you, that it happened to you to teach you, or that you invited it to teach you. So for me, an example is I've been suffering in the last few years from debilitation in my back and in my fascia and everything about my ability to move. And I had 3 back operations and suddenly dawned on me, why did I do that? Well, I did it to get out of my money earning career, right? Because it was a very difficult step to say, okay, I will no longer need all that money in my life. I will live with a lot less and I don't have to work and I can concentrate on my work. But it was so hard to persuade myself and the people in my family that it's almost like my body said, okay, I'll be crippled so you cannot do that career anyways. And now I'm coming out of that. But again, it was an aha moment when I realized why this was happening, right? And for everybody, there is a very good reason, but it takes a lot to get to understand and say, oh, that's why. That makes sense. And again, here I talk about healing. Self-healing is so important. Ultimately, only the self can heal, right? A doctor doesn't heal you. He gives you stuff to stop the symptom. A guide like Lisa cannot heal you. She can offer you a peaceful phase, but boy, will you know how to get out of that and go back to your problem, right? Ultimately, until the person decides themselves to overcome their problem, healing doesn't start. You can have, more peaceful moments, but you need to decide to heal. And then it's the self that heals. Lisa, I don't know. What is your experience with that?
I would 100% agree. The mind is so powerful that it pretty much creates our existence. Yeah, they have to do the work. I always say that, you have to do the work. You have to roll up the sleeves. You have to be committed to yourself and putting yourself first. And I know when I say that, a lot of people cringe, like putting yourself first. That sounds so selfish. But I have found that that's the most important thing, is to heal yourself before you try to even, assist someone else. Not to say that we don't assist others, but I'm just saying self-care is like so important, and that includes, you know, monitoring your mind, body, and spirit. So I know that's a lot, but I hope I answered the question.
Yeah. So what you call mind, body, and spirit, I look at it a little bit different. Steiner talks about the Trinity and the tripartite existence as translating at the lowest level as our activities of willing, acting, or feeling, or thought, right? So we operate in these three levels, and these are the three we need to harness. So we talked at length in our earlier sessions about how the fifth is the charioteer of the second, and that's how you harness will and your ability to be a warrior and to act. Thought is the third, harnessing the sixth, and that's where you need to harness your thinking so you eliminate that negative thinking that introduces fear. And, you know, we think of fear as happening at the feeling level, but it's introduced by thought. So if you can stop it when it is in your mind, stop it right there. And it's that left devil brain that was placed there as an animal brain in early humans to help them survive. So it teaches them to run or fight, right? And but it still runs our lives. And if we can silence that devil brain in the sixth, and it's not only fear, it's judgment, you know, anything that moves you to the four quadrants I talked about, whether it is pride, where you feel you can judge everybody and you're above everybody, or if it is grief and doom and gloom coming, or if it is total fear of what might happen to you, or if it is anger about what's happening around you. All of these four start out in that devil brain. And learning to harness that and silencing it was a very important step in my journey. And then feeling is really where we are passive, where we are receptors, and then whatever we receive translates into something in our body that we call feeling. And the way to balance that is really an alignment of first to seventh that brings you to a state of joy. And that's why I showed you joy as being in the center line of that 500, 600 love to peace level. Joy, if you can feel joy, it means you're aligning between first and seventh, and that is very important. And these are the areas we must harness. Think of ourselves as taming ourselves. We're the wild horse that we need to tame. And we do it in three levels. We do it at the level of action, will, of feeling, and of thought. It helped me break things down that way. I don't know, Janine, what do you think? Is that helpful?
Yeah, see, in the fifth chariot in the second, I always kind of thought of the third chakra being will. So I guess that was one point that I'm not quite following.
So if you think only of the lower self, yeah, it would be the third chakra harnessing the second. But you are staying in the lower half when you do that.
Okay.
And the lower and the upper interact, right? So when you achieve this Eros Ramos or sacred matrimony or chemical wedding or whatever you call it, where your lower self recognizes the existence of the higher self and you are in dialogue with it, then you overlap. So the
Okay.
way the overlap happens is it's like the Merkaba, right? You have a triangle from the fifth to the second and a triangle from the third to the sixth. And if you think about how we digest food and how we assimilate thought, they're very similar processes. That's why the third is the charioteer of the mind. And the third is where reason resides, right? That's the solar plexus.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me now.
What we have to be careful of is a lot of the ancient systems work on the astral level, and that is the level of the subconscious. And we need to leap up. And when you work in yourself, you're not working to change the subconscious. You're working to enter the superconscious. And that's the difference between the astral and the etheric. So in the astral, you remain passive to the environment because you're part of that cosmic soul. It's this wonderful feeling of swimming in the cosmos, right? But that's the astral side, and it's our subconscious. It's where we go when we dream, where we're under hypnosis. That's not the self we're looking to master. The self you're looking to master is in the spirit, is in the etheric. And that's a very difficult thing to explain to people, especially people who are trained in the yoga or astral denominations. It's not that they're wrong, they're fine, but they are not bringing you into the I am. And to come into the I am, you need to come into that, to align yourself to the cosmos that links yourself to the divine. And you do that very consciously. It's not something that happens in a trance or through drugs or anything like that.
Is that what you mean by building your superconscious soul? Is building that connection?
Yes.
Okay.
And it took me forever to recognize that difference, right? It's funny because Steiner talks about yoga being a path that made sense up to the time of Christ, but not after. He doesn't mean don't do yoga. He just says yoga will not take you into I am consciousness. You need to do that yourself. But he never explains it totally. So it took me a lifetime because I started my journey with yoga when I was 14. And I was like, why do you think yoga won't take me there? So it's just that in it you travel the astral, and that's not what we're here to change. We can exist in the astral, we can participate in it, we can experience it or not as clairvoyance, but what we're here to do is alter self at the etheric, at the spirit level. And the other thing that was important for me to recognize, it's not soul that reincarnates, it's spirit. So you have one spirit, you have one upper self, and it incarnates into multiple lower selves, which astrally manifest as souls, right? So you have all of these different individualities that add up to one upper self. And if you look at the different individualities that you encounter in the Akash, that's at the astral level. But the one self is at the spirit level, and it's super conscious and harnesses the astral. I guess they say past and future. I cannot speak to that, but so it's so easy to stay put with what your training was and what you learned, right? And you almost need to pull out of it in order to be your I am.
I guess I'm having a little difficulty in this, and you mentioned that you had a little difficulty at first on why yoga wouldn't be a useful tool.
It is a useful tool
for you to
but
work
it doesn't.
on
Sorry, it he
know,
never says it's not useful, right?
Yeah.
It's just that it's a tool that keeps you here still. It's not taking you into your upper being, your super conscious.
Well, I guess I can see that with Western yoga, but I've practiced yoga in India that I felt really took me, places outside my physical.
Absolutely, the astral is outside your physical, right? It does take you outside your physical. The question is, does it take you to become your own master?
Okay. Well, would you say though that then other tools, to me it's a tool to help you connect. So would other tools also not be sufficient in developing your master? I guess I'm struggling a little bit with that, but I'll meditate on it.
To be your master, you must rewrite what directs your left brain, as an example. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be able to move away from negative feelings, negative beliefs, negative judgments, and realize that all of these negatives are like a film, like a negative film, right? That you imprinted your life on. And when you move to the other realm, you see that film. And it overwhelms you and it scares you and it pushes you out of that realm. The only way to enter the realm in peace is to eliminate that film from being attached to your consciousness. It's subconscious, right? The whole thing is subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Rewrite it, wipe it out. And that's what it means to live beyond karma, right? That, or what the Christians talk about, the original sin. You need to move out of that chain to move into your superconscious. So I don't know that there is a tool that does that. We each need to do that.
Okay.
We each need, how in our Father's Prayer you say, forgive our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. That's a tool. Mm-hmm. Be busy forgiving those who trespass against you, and that will forgive your trespasses. It will erase karma. You see what I'm saying? It's a tool right here in that sentence.
Yes.
But it's a mental process. It's nothing, it's not like you use a Tibetan bowl or a candle or this or that as a tool, right? You just harness self.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And as you harness, recode your script. If your script, includes all of these limitations, all of these you should and you shouldn't, examine it, rewrite it. And you'll do that again and again and again in your life, because as you mature, different things align to truth than before.
It's like your last bullet, one trial, one bite at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need to do it again and again and again. And the way you recognize that it's working, or at least I do, is by checking, how far do I fall when I fall? Okay, then if I fall to 400, where I need science and logic and, there is work to be done to get out of that, bust these walls and move on. In the
Okay.
end, you need to be free to visit every one of these etheric spheres as is necessary, but they don't need to be loaded with akash that chains you down.
So you control them, not the other way around.
Well, they become your lantern, right? And then you become a beacon to the world, ultimately.
That's beautiful.
It's really like having a lantern that is covered with all these dramatic events from your life, and what happens? The light doesn't shine through. You have all these, coverings over the lantern. This takes you back to the Grail, right? How the Grail is this cup, and it's in that cup that we put the host, well, for Mass, you do in Christianity, but the cup symbolizes the vessel that can host spirit. And then this last bullet here, the Holy Spirit is what unites the one to the all. I found that in David Hawkin's Power versus Force. He has a question and answer section in the back, and one of the question is, what on earth is the Holy Spirit? And that's how he answers. He says it is what unites the one to the all. And this is where we need to strive to be, right? On that line that unites the one to the all. So basically, the biggest message I have is we must work on ourselves. And this won't happen in yoga class or in church, or it will happen everywhere in yoga class and in church if you're doing the work on yourself.
Okay.
But it won't happen through the external means. You must make it happen inside.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah.
The whole thing is how to live in presence, and you can think of the David Hawkins ladder as the image of presence. And really, it's a process of making the unconscious conscious. And that's what you don't do in the astral exercises. In the astral exercises, you strive for clairvoyance, but you're not striving to make that unconscious you see conscious. So, and to me, it doesn't matter whether you see it or not, only because I could feel the movements in the etheric, and I could tell, what was taking me where, and then I would sit down and try to figure out why. I don't know what it takes for one to feel that etheric essence in us. I would say it takes that transition of joy I went through So you need to be in a place where you feel totally in magnificence, right? That you feel magnificence about yourself and everything around you, and it brings you to such a joy that you enter that world. And I think once you enter it and you know it's there and you know how to navigate it, then it just takes a little while to make it all conscious and recognize how much unconscious puts darkness on it and try to remove that. And
Yeah,
it's a
I think
different journey.
I think staying in the present moment is a challenge for a lot of people. I know it is for me, you know, thinking about the past, planning for the future. Planning for the future is becoming easier for me, not to keep looking out into the future, but you know, I'm retired now, which
Makes it easier.
it makes it easier. It makes it a lot easier.
What I was doing when I was working and I had to work with planning all the time was don't go in the minutia of the planning. Set high-level milestones and then gauge how you're doing against these high-level milestones. So it's like the story I said with the urns and the rocks and the gravel and the water and the sand and whatever. It's identifying what the rocks are and placing them properly, and then try to live up to that until you decide it makes sense to change the goals. Sometimes as you go along, you recognize, oh my gosh, our whatever our goals were is not where we should be going at all.
Yeah, that's good advice. Get out of your own story, be of service, let go your lower ego. When you let go of your story, what remains is ego harnessed by the upper self. Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, the minute you fall into your own story, you live in passivity. Look what's happening to me. Let me tell you so you can see how much I'm suffering. You know, really? And this is where you need to enter the comic phase where you can laugh at yourself in that story. And the minute you do that, something changes.